I rise today in this place to condemn the horrific terrorist attacks carried out by Hamas in Israel on 7th of October and stand with Israel and with those who have been affected by this tragedy. I mourn those whose lives were ended so violently. I pray for those whose whereabouts remain unknown. I call for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages that include children, women and elderly who were taken and abducted from their homes. I grieve with the families in Australia whose loved ones have been so severely impacted by this incident, and I offer my condolences to all of those who have been touched by this tragic event. At the outset, I want to thank and acknowledge the tremendous support provided to me and the broader Jewish community by the Premier, Deputy Premier and my colleagues through what has been a very difficult week. I'd also like to acknowledge the Leader of the Opposition and his team for the bipartisanship that they have shown, and particularly acknowledge the efforts of my friend and fellow co-chair of the Parliamentary Friends of Israel, the member for Caulfield, who has so many people in his local community directly affected by this tragedy. 7th of October was meant to be a day of great celebration in Israel. The annual festival of Simchat Torah, which marks the completion of the reading of the Jewish Torah, and is traditionally marked in many communities with a day to celebrate Jewish identity. However, it ended with the death of more Jews in a single day since the Holocaust. And looking back to the time before the Holocaust and all the terrible pogroms and expulsions that have been committed against the Jewish people over the millennia, there have been few days in Jewish history that have had such a tragic end. There can never be any excuse or justification for the murder, torture and abduction of innocent civilians. There can never be any equivocation that somehow the Jews of Israel are deserving of this treatment simply because of their nationality and their religious beliefs. We cannot be accepting of different levels of brutality and terrorism based on the cause it purports to support. And it is the right, if not the duty, of every state to protect its citizens from terrorist attacks such as those we saw on 7th of October. The past week has taken a great personal emotional toll. And while the initial shock has subsided, my overwhelming feeling has been one of sadness. My sadness for the people of Israel who were victims of these terrible acts of violence. My sadness for those who were taken hostage and whose whereabouts remain unknown. My sadness for all innocent lives that have been taken in this conflict that has lasted too long. And my sadness for all innocent lives that may be lost in future rounds of the conflict. I also want to talk about my sadness of the Jewish community experience in Melbourne over the past few days. Many families are grieving, but the thing that leaves me raw is the extra precautions that members of the community must do to ensure that they and their families are kept safe. At a community level, events have needed to be held behind closed doors with venue information only provided at late notice. With the tremendous support of Victoria Police and the Community Security Group, a more open and public show of mourning could only occur with everyone contained within a secure fence surrounded by our police force. I understand and fully support the need for safe protection, but that even in Melbourne, one of the most successful multicultural places on earth, requires Jews to be kept behind barricades to hold a mourning vigil, lest they be targeted themselves, saddens me greatly. The freedom to peacefully protest is an important and cherished right for Australians. But the grotesque displays of anti-Semitic vilification that we saw at a rally in Sydney last week, and the threatening behaviour of Nazi thugs roaming our trains on the weekend searching for Jews, brings shivers to me and many Jewish Australians, and scenes that I could never believe we would see in Australia. There is no room for any anti-Semitism in Australia, just as there is no room for any form of vilification against any people, regardless of their race, colour or creed. At an individual level, many families are feeling vulnerable at this time. Some Jewish schools have asked their students not to wear their school uniform or not wear the uniform when they are in public. Jewish parents of children at state and independent schools are quietly removing signs of Jewish identity that the children may display for fear of being targeted simply for being Jewish. And some Jewish families have felt abandoned by their usually firm friends who can't bring themselves to check in on their Jewish friends because of their differences or even perceived differences of opinion on Israeli politics. Finally, I feel sad that the hope for a lasting peace between Israelis and Palestinians feels further away than ever before. 30 years ago was a time of great optimism. September 1993, two historic enemies, PLO chairman Yasser Arafat and Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, met on the White House lawn to sign the Oslo Accords. The normalisation of relations between Jordan and Israel followed, and it appeared that a new dawn was breaking. But there have always been enemies to peace. Hamas has always been an enemy of peace. Hamas rejected the Oslo Accords, celebrated Rabin's death, and has been committed to the destruction of Israel. But let us not leave this horrific event keep the voices of peace silent. In the words of the late King Hussein, let our voices rise high to speak of our commitment to peace of all time, for all times, to come and let us tell those who live in darkness who are the enemies of light.